You don't fall apart when things get hard. You compress. You gather everything inward and keep functioning, even when the weight is clearly more than one person should be carrying alone. Asking for help doesn't feel neutral to you. It feels loaded, heavy, like opening a door that might not close the way you expect once it's open. Before the question even forms, your body reacts first. A pause, a subtle tightening in your chest, a quiet resistance that shows up automatically without asking permission. I'll handle it. That sentence isn't confidence, it's containment. It's your nervous system choosing predictability over relief, control over uncertainty. You learned early that relying on yourself feels safer than depending on people. People change, responses vary, availability disappears, expectations shift. So you learned to minimize need before it becomes visible. You became the capable one, the reliable one, the person others assume will manage without support. That assumption slowly hardened into expectation, and expectation quietly turned into identity. Now, when help is offered, something in you hesitates, not because you don't want connection, but because connection comes with exposure. If you ask, you have to explain. If you explain, you have to reveal. And revealing means someone else gets access to a part of you that usually stays controlled, measured, contained. So you downplay, you delay, you tell yourself it's not that serious, not urgent, not worth interrupting someone else's life. You tell yourself other people need help more than you do. From the outside, this looks like strength, independence, emotional discipline, and sometimes it truly is. But underneath, there's a quieter truth most people never notice. You don't hate asking for help because you believe you're above it. You hate it because you associate it with cost. Cost to your autonomy, cost to your sense of control, cost to the image of being the one who doesn't need anything from anyone. At some point, your mind learned that needing others could lead to disappointment, misattunement, or feeling unseen even after you asked clearly. So you adopted. You became self-reliant, not as an act of empowerment, but as a strategy of emotional risk management. Your nervous system learned that self-containment reduces exposure, that silence reduces vulnerability, that handling things alone reduces the chance of being let down. And over time, that strategy stopped being conscious. It became automatic. Now, when something breaks, your instinct isn't to reach out. It's to organize the damage internally. You analyze, you plan, you endure, even when you're tired, even when you're overwhelmed, even when help would genuinely change everything. What you're protecting isn't pride. It's stability, the fragile equilibrium you built by learning how to depend on yourself when others felt unreliable. Asking for help threatens that equilibrium. It introduces variables you can't fully predict or control. And for a mind trained to survive by reducing uncertainty, that feels dangerous, not comforting. So you stay quiet, capable, functional, carrying more than you show. If this feels uncomfortably accurate, pause here for a moment. Leave a like if this resonates, and subscribe to the Mind Edit if you want to keep understanding the patterns you learned quietly. Because this isn't about weakness, it's about the invisible rules your nervous system learned long before you ever questioned them. This pattern didn't appear out of nowhere. It was learned slowly, quietly, through moments where asking didn't lead to relief, but to discomfort. Maybe help came with strings attached. Maybe it arrived late. Maybe it was conditional. Or maybe you were told directly or indirectly that needing too much was inconvenient. So your mind made a calculation. It learned that depending on others increased emotional risk, while depending on yourself reduced it. Over time, that calculation became automatic. You stopped checking whether it was still true. What looks like independence on the outside is often a refined form of self-protection on the inside. You don't reject help because you don't value connection. You reject it because connection feels unpredictable. When you ask for help, you're not just asking for assistance. You're opening a window into your internal state, and windows can be seen through. For someone who learned to stay regulated by staying contained, that visibility feels unsafe. Your nervous system prefers problems it can manage alone, even if they're heavier, even if they take longer. Because alone, you can control the pace. You can decide when to engage. You can retreat without explanation. Asking for help removes that control. It introduces timing that isn't yours, reactions you can't script, interpretations you can't correct in real time. That uncertainty activates the same internal alarm as physical instability, not loudly, subtly, a tightening, a hesitation, a pull inward. So instead of asking, you reorganize, you problem solve, you stretch yourself a little further than is comfortable. And because you're capable, it usually works. That's the trap. Every time you manage alone, the pattern reinforces itself. Your brain logs it as proof that asking wasn't necessary, not because it wasn't helpful, but because you survived without it. Survival becomes the metric, not ease, not sustainability, not emotional cost. You start measuring strength by how little you need. Neuroscience supports this pattern. The brain prioritizes strategies that reduce uncertainty, even if they increase long-term strain. Predictability feels safer than relief when safety has been threatened before. So your system chooses the familiar discomfort of doing everything yourself over the unfamiliar vulnerability of asking. This is why help offered at the wrong moment feels invasive instead of supportive. Your system wasn't prepared. The request wasn't initiated by you. Control was removed too quickly. And that's why you often think, I'd rather do it myself. Not because you enjoy the workload, but because you trust your own process more than someone else's response. You also learn something else, that once you ask, you're no longer allowed to struggle privately. People check in, they watch. They expect updates, and being observed while vulnerable feels far more uncomfortable than struggling silently. So you carry it alone, quietly, competently. If this is landing, pause again. Leave a like if this feels accurate, and stay with the mind edit if you want to understand why your mind learned these rules so deeply. Because this isn't about stubbornness. It's about a nervous system that learned how to stay intact by staying self-contained. At some point, this strategy stops feeling like a choice. It just feels like who you are, the one who handles things, the one who doesn't ask, the one who keeps going. You don't announce your struggles, you compartmentalize them. You tuck them away and deal with them in pieces, on your schedule, behind closed doors. And because you're functional, no one questions it. They assume you're fine. They assume you don't need support. Sometimes you encourage that assumption without realizing it, because being seen as capable feels safer than being seen as needing something. But there's a quiet cost to this way of living. Over time, self-reliance stops being empowering and starts becoming isolating. Not traumatically, subtly. You notice it in moments where you wish someone would offer help without you having to ask, where you wish someone would notice the weight you're carrying. You'll realize you've made that weight invisible. The nervous system that learned to survive through self-containment doesn't easily switch modes. It doesn't suddenly trust just because circumstances change. For you, safety was built through control, through preparation, through minimizing dependence. So even when help is safe now, your body doesn't immediately believe it. That's why the idea of asking can feel strangely destabilizing, like standing on ground that might shift. You're not afraid of people, you're afraid of losing internal stability. And here's the reframe most people never offer. Asking for help isn't a single act. It's a skill, one that your nervous system was never taught how to practice safely. You weren't shown how to ask without consequence, how to receive without debt, how to be supported without being scrutinized. So your system did the only thing it knew how to do. It learned to endure. But endurance isn't the same as resilience. Resilience includes flexibility, choice, the ability to lean without collapsing. The goal isn't to force yourself to ask for help when your system isn't ready. The goal is to slowly teach your nervous system that support doesn't automatically mean danger, that help can be selective, boundaried, on your terms. You don't have to hand everything over. You don't have to explain everything. You don't have to expose more than you choose. Asking can be small, specific, controlled. And when it's done that way, it doesn't dismantle your stability, it expands it. People who hate asking for help aren't weak. They're often deeply adaptive. They learned how to survive without guarantees. But survival strategies aren't meant to become permanent identities. They're meant to evolve when the environment allows it. You don't need to stop being capable. You just need permission to stop being alone in everything. And that permission doesn't come from others. It comes from recognizing that your resistance was never
a flaw. It was intelligence shaped by experience. The moment you see that, the pattern loosens. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to choose support when it actually serves you. Enough to stay self-reliant without being self-contained. Enough to carry less without losing yourself. That's not weakness. That's a mind editing itself.